Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. The New Economy Project, a nonprofit that has been fighting for economic justice in New York City for the last 30 years, has set its sights on legislation called COPA, the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, that's designed to bring thousands of apartments into permanently affordable community control through the process known as community land trusts. After a 5-year effort, working with housing advocates across the city, including NWBCCC here in the Bronx. In the council's last session of 2025, right at the end of the year, the COPA legislation passed by a vote of 38-8, although it was then vetoed by former Mayor Eric Adams. The New Economy Project is hopeful that in 2026, that veto will be overturned by the new city council that just began its work in the new year. So tonight we'll review the COPA legislation and explain what it might mean for thousands of tenants in the Bronx and even throughout New York City. So please join me in welcoming a staff attorney for the New Economy Project who's worked on the COPA and the broader Community Land Trust campaign. It is Elena Rodriguez. Nice to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here.
And he's been here before, the Development Director for NWBCCC, the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. Welcome back to Edward Garcia. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Elena, let's just start with you. New Economy Project. Basically, what is it? You've worked with hundreds of community groups over to build systemic, to build justice over systemic injustice, and economy works for all. Tell us a little bit more about it and what the agenda is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So New Economy Project is an economic justice group. Our mission is to build an economy that works for all, rooted in racial and neighborhood equity, cooperation, and ecological sustainability. We believe in pursuing lasting and transformational change. That's really what the city is going to need if it wants to attack this affordability crisis head on. That's why we are fighting for COPA. COPA is a tool to do just that, to attack the affordability crisis here in New York City.
And we'll get into the details of that. I'm just curious, is it endlessly frustrating, or are you so focused on, because this took 5 years to do, you're just focused on what we have to do? Doesn't matter, you just go step by step by step. I mean, just what's the attitude of the folks you work with?
It's slightly frustrating, but you know, it's also positive and optimistic. We have this sort of fight and build model, so we are fighting against the injustices, but we're also building towards the future we want to see, and that's really where COPA comes in. You know, we are wanting to put in policies that work for New Yorkers, that do things like bring housing into community ownership, to steward that housing for permanent affordability. So it's frustrating, yes, but I would say overwhelmingly we are looking at an optimistic future. Without
wanting to get, because we don't want to talk politics specifically, but I would think, and I think everybody would think, that the new mayor is probably a better choice than the old mayor for the agenda that you've just laid out. That Mayor Mamdani probably is a little more likely to listen to what you have to say.
Well, I think that's fair to say. He supports CLTs. He supports COPA. COPA was actually right there in his campaign's housing platform. So we are excited to work with the new administration for his agenda. We think it is vitally important, though, that the council override this veto.
Yeah, that's coming up, and that'll be. Do you think it'll be as soon as the first meeting, or it's going to take a little bit of reorienting people to what's going on?
Well, they should do it as quickly as possible. It might not happen in the first stated meeting, but hopefully within the second one. They should do it as quickly as possible.
You'll be knocking on the door. So what is COPA? It's the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. What is it? And then, of course, we'll bring Edward into the conversation to really talk about the transition of housing. So what is it?
So COPA is really a tool to preserve affordable housing. It's innovative, but it's also battle tested. We can look to San Francisco, where it was implemented in 2019 and has great success. But sticking with New York City, if you don't mind me just backing up a bit to talk about the affordability crisis.
Do your thing.
So we are facing an unprecedented affordability crisis. And if you look at our rent-stabilized buildings, it's no wonder that we have this crisis, because over the past 2 decades, we've lost hundreds of thousands of rent-stabilized units to speculators.
I just want to repeat that. Hundreds of thousands.
That's right.
Do the number, 1, 2, and get up to hundreds of thousands. A lot.
And the way that that housing is being lost is that these deep-pocketed investors are coming in and snatching up the buildings. Sometimes they are putting in all-cash offers, so that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the market, and it also displaces tenants, because the deep-pocketed investors, they're worried about their bottom lines. They're not worried about the tenants, so they're thinking about, how do we raise rents, putting in these faceless management companies that let the buildings fall into disrepair. And so New Yorkers are being displaced because they either can't afford this raising rent, or they frankly can't live in these buildings with these awful violations of the housing maintenance code. So that's sort of the playing field that we're on.
That you're working on, and then this is going to ultimately do what?
Yes.
We're going to break that down a little bit as we go, because there's a lot of details in there. But
Right.
then what are you hoping to do with those properties?
Well, so first, COPA is trying to create more of a balance between these deep-pocketed investors and these vetted, qualified, mission-driven nonprofits, groups like the Bronx CLT. So we want to level the playing field to give these groups an opportunity to buy these buildings, to bid on certain at-risk buildings when they go up for sale on the market. And then that's not the end of the picture, because when the nonprofits acquire these buildings, they'll be working with the tenants. They can provide a pathway to home ownership through condo conversions. But there's also many renters who want to stay renters, and they will help to steward buildings, keeping them permanently and deeply affordable. And really the vision is we want to keep New Yorkers in their neighborhoods. We want to give them a fighting chance to afford this city, to be able to live where their families have lived for generations, to be able to age in place with dignity, and to really maintain the character of their neighborhoods.
And the bottom line really is to take control of the property away from corporations and give it to tenants who live there and may even know more about what the issues are, and of course care very much about their community.
That's right, and it's vitally important here. We know that this pressure is especially impacting Black and brown communities, and in those communities with this huge amount of speculative pressure, it only takes a few buildings falling to these big corporations to really set off this chain effect and change the character of the neighborhood.
And change the neighborhood.
Exactly.
Edward, maybe we should explain what community land trust is. So the idea is to take buildings that are in transition, and rather than have corporations own them, go to community land trusts. What is it?
I just want to say that Northwest Bronx historically has been doing a lot of tenant organizing that has won a lot of great things, help people stay in their homes, allow for the roofs not to fall over their heads. And we've seen time and time again that we have found ourselves going back to those same buildings. And we needed to do something of how do we break that cycle.
Going back to the same
buildings? The
buildings?
same buildings that we supported the tenants to help address the living conditions that were deplorable. And Northwest Bronx
can't get out of that cycle.
And we wanted to do something different. And we've seen community land trusts used in many organized communities to ensure that housing is removed from those folks who are not necessarily interested in providing safe and affordable housing, but rather use it as a business practice. And so community land trust is a tool used by organized communities to remove housing from speculation, to ensure that it's controlled and governed by community members and folks who the core of its mission is to provide a home that is affordable, that is governed collectively by the community, the folks who have been in that community. And that includes not only the folks who live in it, but also experts, folks who know how to preserve and keep housing, because we know running housing in New York City could be very complex.
And you said this is a core thing. It's core for both of these organizations.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is really, and certainly I've known you folks for a long, long time, and this is what you're all about. The New Economy Project's website has this wonderful map, and I want to show folks the map because I want you to get an idea of how many community land trusts there are. So we've got the map. We're going to show you two of them. This one is of New York City, so you can see how many there are. There are 20 in New York City, and you can see where they are. And now let's take a look at the ones in the Bronx. So there are 3. You can see right at the bottom left there is the one at Bruckner and Lincoln Avenue in the South Bronx. Then a little above it is the one at Melrose Avenue and 157th Street in the South Bronx. And then there's one up in Bedford Park. I wonder if you NWBCCC had a hand in that, because that is your...
Absolutely.
That's in Creston and 196th Street.
Well, yeah, it's what we call like an offspring of Northwest Bronx, and we were very intentional that our community land trust is tied to organizing. So Northwest Bronx is kind of the parent organization of the Bronx Community Land Trust. We want to make sure that all of our community land trust efforts stay connected to organizing, and hope that is kind of like in partnership. And it's also how we hope to grow our community land trust through community organizing.
How's it going? First of all, how long ago was that converted? And then how's it going? Are you saying, wow, this is working out and we want to duplicate it, or we kind of learned some things, maybe we shouldn't do it this way?
Well, it's a model that Northwest Bronx has been exploring for decades. And thanks to also our partners at the New Economy Project, about a decade ago, we started to get very serious about like what actually it would mean to build an ecosystem in the city where community land trusts could thrive. We had already community land trusts that have existed in the city for years that have done really well, and they were operating on their own, and we have actually grown that to an ecosystem which has allowed us to also receive the adequate support to operate and run and incorporate our community land trust. So Northwest Bronx incorporated our community land trust in 2020.
So it's 5 years. Rents have, I don't want to use it, stabilized. Rents are where they seem more affordable, and the condition of the building is what?
Well, competing in New York City against private equity is really hard. So at this point, our community land trust, which is called the Bronx Community Land Trust, doesn't own any property. However, we have 3 projects in the pipeline, which include one new construction that will be a homeownership on our community land trust, and we have one preservation project that is in the Tremont area, and we have a project that came out of a TPT process that is also going to be on their community land trust. So at the end, we'll have 3 properties in the next coming years.
Do you have a vision of how many, ultimately, how large this can grow over, let's say, the next 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah.
Or is it just, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Assuming that the legislation gets passed, that's another story. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think like the reality is that there hasn't been a lot of investment paired with the growth of community land trusts, and this is why not only we're fighting at the city level for COPA, but we're also fighting at the state for the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act alongside with money to allow for community land trusts to be able to acquire. And so I think the last few years we have been setting the foundation to also ensure that people understand what does it actually mean to collectively govern, right? And I think that in its own, it's a very important part of the first phase that we have embarked now in the coming years as we continue to have conversations. So we're working on 3 projects, but we're in conversations with dozens of tenant associations about what it actually will look like, and do they actually want it? And this is really important.
You don't want to come top down, because then you'd be
Absolutely.
another entity that's coming top down, and that's like the last thing.
And we want people to be informed about this decision, right? Like, do you want to remain as renters and collectively continue to stay in your home, or do you actually want to think about seeing yourself as an owner?
Ms. Rodriguez, you mentioned San Francisco. They adopted COPA in 2019. What did you learn from that could be duplicated? And were there some things there that you said, that's not New York, we're not going to do that?
Well, it's been a really great case study because it's been incredibly successful there. They've already stabilized over 1,000 tenants. So San Francisco tenants have become stabilized thanks to COPA. You're right, it passed in 2019, and I like to point that out because it's achieved all of that affordability, even though it was going into effect in some of the worst years of the pandemic. So it has quickly become a very effective preservation tool. A large portion of the units that have been preserved over the past several years are thanks to COPA. So it has really been sort of our our case study.
Is that the only city that's done this that you're aware of, or the only one that's really moved it forward in that way?
There are other cities that have had similar opportunity to purchase acts, but we were really looking at San Francisco because they have a similar housing market to New York City. They're under similar pressures. It's a hot housing market where things move very quickly, under a lot of speculative pressure. There's been a lot of gentrification happening over the past several decades. So we were looking to that as the model. And also, because they're in San Francisco, it has not slowed down the market. They still have some of the fastest building sales in the country. It hasn't slowed development.
That would be encouraging here for New York City. That's for darn sure.
That's right. But then I do want to mention, the City Council put in a lot of work to tailor this version of COPA so that it will work in New York City. So they spent 5 years in coalition with stakeholders, groups like New Economy Project, CLTs, like Bronx CLT and Northwest Bronx.
We wanted to do a shout out to Nos Cadamos and South Bronx Unite as well.
Exactly.
Because they've been involved in this.
But other stakeholders as well, like private developers, the city's Housing Preservation and Development Department. And so they've really worked collectively, and they held public hearings as well. So this is really a targeted bill.
This wasn't a thing. I just want to move it forward because I really want to get to a very important point. But so this wasn't one of those things where an organization put it forward and said, this is how we're going to do it. You really opened it up, much like you did with the Kingsbridge Armory, where you didn't build the armory you wanted, you built the armory that the community wanted. I really want to roll up our sleeves on this because I want people to understand for their own buildings and what the possibilities are. What is the criteria to be able to qualify for this process? And, does it need to be expanded? I mean, because there are some specific considerations.
So it is a narrower universe than in San Francisco, but it's a strategic and targeted universe. So we are looking at buildings that are most at risk of tenant displacement because of either physical distress or because they have these expiring affordability restrictions. So under COPA...
That's a rent guidelines thing in some cases.
Well, it's...
I'm just guessing.
Buildings that are under agreements with HPD, they might have gotten some tax abatements, and the trade-off is that they have agreed to keep their rents low, but those expire. And so these buildings are at risk, especially at the point of sale, for being flipped, for rents raising, for just driving gentrification in the city. So that's the universe that this bill targets. It's multifamily buildings that have to have 4 or more units. If the owner lives in the building, it's 6 or more units. And then they will only come under COPA when the landlord decides to sell. And they have to either have physical distress or have an expiring affordability restriction.
And then what do they do to move this forward so they can say, hey, we saw it on BronxTalk. These folks really said what we wanted to hear. Then what do they need to do to get there?
Well, the tenants in these buildings, if you are living in a building that has some terrible violations of the housing maintenance code, you can be organizing now.
I'm going to take a deep breath about that because we read the stories all the time in the newspaper.
So you can be organizing today. You don't have to wait until COPA is in effect. It'll take a year once it's passed to go into effect, but tenants can be talking to each other, forming tenant organizations, partnering with groups like Community Land Trust, because then when COPA is in effect and then those buildings go up for sale, CLTs will be primed to state their interest and then make these bona fide offers and acquire the building.
This is where my friend Edward Garcia comes into play. I asked you the same question when you were here in April about tenant advocacy and tenant organizing, but let's repeat it. It's so vital and so important because we want to improve housing in the Bronx. I want to improve it in the Bronx and New York City, of course. So what should people who are in a building in this condition do to organize, to get themselves together so that this process can actually happen?
Yeah, and I'm glad Elena mentioned that, like, conversations should be happening now. Whether we win TOPA, and we're hopeful that we will, or not, I think we should get organized.
Think positive.
Yeah, we're gonna get it done, and I think we have enough council support to get it done.
Well, it was 38-8, but of course there'll be new council members, so you got to re-educate.
And there were a lot of no's. A lot of people have questions that we're hoping to address in the coming days. tenants should be talking to each other, to their neighbors about the issues that they're facing, and also about the possibility of like what would it mean for us to be in a effort to express our interests, to collectively govern, and to preserve this home over the long term, right? Like we want people to be able to have that discussion with each other, and sometimes people may want to work together and do that, others might not, and I think that's okay. And I think what Northwestern wants to do is encourage that conversation, provide adequate training, but also the most important, we want you to also be in community and fight, any unjust conditions that are in your home, to ensure that you're living with dignity.
Imagine doing this process, you want to have the strongest organization so that when the possibility really comes to life, you can say, okay, this is how we viewed it already, without having to say, what do we start doing?
Yeah, this will only work effectively if tenants are organized.
One of the things that was interesting to me in our previous discussion before the show was the notion of landlords selling the building. And can a landlord be pressured to sell?
I think we've seen tenant associations be able to successfully get the property owner to come to the table and decide to walk away. And the reality is that by getting organized, you are exposing a lot of flaws and injustices that many property owners get to walk away with. And I think that it's an important step to start organizing, because that creates
the bottom
pressure
line.
That sometimes some property owners are not willing to, negotiate or be able to address. So
they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, they'd rather just walk away.
And then at that moment, what do they do? Do they say, hello, Ms. Rodriguez, and we need help, or call Mr. Garcia?
Yeah, there are many groups that are thinking about this. In fact, there are also private developers who we have seen who are interested in even
who will work with you,
who will work with tenant associations and think about like, how do I facilitate this process? So I want to also emphasize that this is not just about like the public sector, right? There are also private developers who are mission driven, who want to partner and want to play a role in helping the transition of housing from controlled by corporations to tenant and resident
I
control
have
housing.
moderated the real estate breakfast in the Bronx every year for many years, so I know a number of them, and a number of them really care about building the right kind of housing.
Right.
Those are the people we're talking about. I want to ask you about, you were here in April. We talked about 2770-80 Kingsbridge Terrace. Steve Finkelstein was the landlord.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the kind of building that is in transition and could be qualifying for COPA and for this process to turn into a CLT?
Yeah, I mean,
It is.
I would assume a building like that should, right? Because this business model of allowing buildings to fall apart, to eventually having to need a system replacement, to then pass that cost to the tenants, is unfair. And we're seeing in the case with 2770 and 2780 is that we're arguing that even those improvements that now the cost has been passed on to the tenants through a major capital improvement continues to give tenants issues. That roof that was replaced continues to leak. The heat isn't constant anymore. So there are pressing issues that continues to persist, and we think that certainly a building like that should be qualifying for COPA.
So that brings us back to you, Ms. Rodriguez. Do you have a vision on how many ultimately could fall under this category in New York City? Certainly we're concerned about the Bronx. Or is it the kind of thing that will roll out organically as people realize this is possible, assuming it gets past City Council?
Well, like you said in your intro, I think it has the potential to stabilize housing for thousands of New Yorkers. Right now, New Economy coordinates this coalition of tenant organizations that are working in partnership with CLTs. There are over a dozen of those that are actively formed right now. These are the buildings that are most likely to be impacted by COPA because they already have organized tenants working in partnership with CLTs.
And with the New Economy project, I mean, you folks have been involved?
As a sort of a coordinating role.
Right, because you don't officially have the process yet. Okay. I got it.
Right. And so just to say, so we already have these partnerships, and we see COPA as a way to sort of catalyze and create more of these as the word gets out that this is a viable pathway, again, possibly to home ownership if the tenants want to form a condo conversion, but also to bringing that building into community hands and reaching deep levels of affordability.
You know, I wanted to just bring this up before we run out of time. There was a story in the Times about the Pinnacle Group. I don't know if you saw it, going bankrupt. And the new mayor, Mayor Mamdani, said New York City would intervene in the bankruptcy case because tenants have just what we've been talking about, complained about living conditions, et cetera. That sounds like the perfect COPA, and I don't know if you're familiar with that project, it was written up in the Times, but that sounds like the perfect COPA situation. It's in bankruptcy, somebody's going to take control of it, right? That's what we want to do.
Transfers that are happening through bankruptcy will be excluded from COPA. But I am familiar with the Pinnacle portfolio, and I think you're right. It is a perfect opportunity to get some of those buildings into community ownership. So we're hoping that the administration will help to facilitate that. And the tenants have been organizing. They have been really at work.
This
getting
is a
attention on the
perfect
building.
example of what Edward was just talking about, that if you get started, you could be further down the road when the opportunity happens.
That's right, and maybe if we have COPA, those tenants who have been organizing for years could have sort of pressured owners into selling before it got to this point, before it went through
Fits
bankruptcy.
right into our dialogue. We've just got about a minute left. Edward, who do you call if you're a tenant now and you're saying I heard what's going on, I want to be in, they call NWBCCC, what do you do?
Yeah, there's actually a very robust tenant movement in New York City and also in the Bronx, and we're happy to not only help you organize your tenant association, but also connect you to other groups, right? We have partners across the Bronx who are actively supporting tenants to build tenant associations. So Northwest Bronx hosts monthly community meetings that you can come and have a conversation with other community members.
You'll
about
never
issues.
not take the call. Elena Rodriguez, thank you so much. Say hello to all my friends over there at New Economy Project. Same over there, Edward Garcia at NWBCCC. They're my neighbors, so what can I tell you? We're all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you for having us.
And let's, City Council, I hope you're watching. You got to take the vote and override that veto, and that concludes the program. We want to thank our producer, is Ray Pagnucco, and all of the people who work on our Bronxnet production and editing crew. And of course, to you too, it is always on Bronxnet and BronxTalk about you, the people of the Bronx. Next week, we're going to be with the commissioner, one of the commissioners in the city, and we're going to talk about student loans. Many people are caught up in this terrible morass of federal student loans. We're going to deal with that next week. See you then.